Hello everyone, and welcome to Deep Dive Zone, a Sonic the Hedgehog rewatch podcast for fans of all shapes and sizes. As usual, I'm your host Devin, joined by my co-hosts Lauren and Bruce, and guys, today we are doing more of Sonic SatAM.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, it's been interesting so far.
Yeah, and it's only going to get more complicated from here on out, and not in a bad way.
Oh boy. Alright.
We are starting off tonight with Season 2, Episode 3, No Brainer. Sonic attempts a solo rescue to prevent prisoners from being roboticized and is hit by a memory scrambler that erases short-term memory. Snively finds Sonic and brainwashes him into believing they are friends and that the Freedom Fighters are a subversive group he infiltrated on Snively's behalf.
This episode is just more proof of how badass Uncle Chuck is.
True.
I know. It's also proof that the comic writers were totally cheating off of SatAM's notes, because I remember for a very long period of time this comic in one of the early stories where Sonic gets brainwashed, or he loses his memories, and Robotnik convinces him that he works for him, and he goes and fights his friends. And this was the actual episode, and this one makes a little bit more sense as well.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's a fair point.
Although this one also doesn't make perfect sense because it displays Robotropolis having like chili dog vending machines.
Okay, I was gonna bring that up.
Is
why?
Maybe Robotnik installed them as a trap, but the trap doesn't work. That's the only thing I can think of why Robotropolis would have chili dog vending machines.
Well, it's the same thing as that one episode of Adventures of Sonic where they bait Sonic with real chili dogs even though he doesn't know it's them, so they could have just poisoned them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did remind me of Adventures. I don't think this show does that again, though. So, not a recurring thing.
Yeah.
It's just it's a weird little question mark.
It's fine. They've got these, like, hollowed-out, like, guard robo-suits now, which make way more sense than the terrifying proportions on the SWAT-bot suits.
Yeah.
Yes, that is true. So, at the beginning of the episode, Robotnik leaves to do something, and leaves Snively in charge, so this is kind of Snively's time in the spotlight as the villain for this episode. And I love how he goes about it. There's one part where he tries to like imitate Robotnik. He's like, "Fools, must I do everything?" and smashes his fist on the chair, but then he hurts it. And yes, you're.
Yeah, we also get some jokes from him about like how incompetent and inefficient the Robotnik Empire is, and it makes me think like I don't know if Snively is necessarily fit to lead it, but it's fun to me that he's aware of how kind of pathetic it is.
Well, at least on a level of evil, Snively is kind of more, at least in this episode, kind of more effective than Robotnik. He
got pretty close.
Comes up with a plan, executes it like pretty much perfectly, and almost succeeds.
I think what it is with Snively is that he's less powerful, but he's more pragmatic.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I will say, the main fault that I find with this episode is, I don't know how literal it's supposed to be, but throughout the whole thing they represent Sonic's memory problems through him having, like, big purple circles around his eyes.
Yeah,
and nobody even thinks to ask Sonic, what's wrong with your eyes?
Yeah, I was thinking that. It's a little weird. Unless, it's just, that's only there for our benefit, which is an easy answer, but I don't think it's actually the case. I don't
think that we needed that. I
Yeah.
think if Sonic's memory is modified, then people are going to know from having watched the show.
Well, yeah, of course.
We mentioned Adventures. Here's Adventures again. Adventures had a thing where whenever there's a change in state, suddenly the character gets a change in costume.
True.
This is like a more, less exaggerated version of that.
Yeah.
I can imagine the Adventures of Sonic version where Sonic is just like wearing a mini version of Robotnik's suit.
I could see that, yes. I knew that because I'd seen this before, and so I watched it again, and yeah, there's no indication any like other characters can actually see it, so I don't think it's supposed to actually be there.
Yeah, I did.
Oh, I have to put another strike again. I keep yammering on about it, but now at this point, I'm just keeping track. The power ring, it can restore memories too.
Right. Oh yeah, that's true.
He can do everything.
That's kind of a gray zone for me, because they did use it to get, roboticized people's memories back. The problem is that it's not clear enough with Chuck, because he has that indomitable will of fire that, always manifests and allows him to be the most amazing human being ever born, despite not being a human.
It makes a little more sense with Chuck because,
it makes sense.
He's already got the will,
right?
And he's related to Sonic, so maybe he can use the power rings a little bit, so it enhances his will, and then he can break free. And maybe, I guess, by the same logic, then it makes it doesn't
Sonic's
bring back memories.
Sonic's got superior Uncle Chuck genetics.
Yes.
Maybe.
I feel like that's kind of mixed messaging for this very anti-authoritarian, anti-fascist show.
I'm
being a bitch. Don't worry about it.
Well, yeah, no, but I
listen. I didn't have very many notes for this, so I'm just rolling off the cuff. My last note on here is, why doesn't Dulcy, the largest freedom fighter, simply eat the other 5? So it's
what?
That's a good that's a good reference. I approve of that reference.
Oh, it was a reference. I was so confused.
It's Futurama joke.
Why does Ross, the largest friend, not simply eat the other 5?
Okay.
Also, this episode made me realize I don't really like Dulcy, but not for any reason. She just seems too cartoony.
Yeah.
Right, in this set. I have a few more notes. All of Snively's antics, because Snively is the best.
Oh, Snively's great.
He's got an evil laugh, but it's really high pitched and silly too. I like that. And when he gets brainwashed, his first reaction to seeing Robotnik is just completely body slamming him.
It's pure violence.
So tiny compared to Robotnik, and he just is deflected off of his huge belly and flies backwards. And it's the best moment. It's hilarious.
I do love the fact that his first thought is just violence.
Robotnik has a powerful ballistic shield.
It doesn't come up very much because no one attacks him head on like that, but apparently.
Yeah.
Some of the creatures in this show are kind of generic fantasy creatures, but I like the dragonfly crossed with the bird that's like a messenger for that's neat.
That was an interesting animal. I kind of caught me off guard for a second because most of the animals have been real life or real animals aside from dragons. So
and those weird dinosaur things.
Yeah, and then the dinosaur, quote unquote dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Right. I've realized that this show has an ongoing trend, which I like, of solving the main issue, but then in the last few minutes, suddenly they ramp up the tension again for one final challenge to overcome. Because in this episode, it's they defeat, the SWAT boss that Snively brought, and I think they brainwash him, and so they won. But then he already had called a bunch of stealth bots, and so they have to call off the attack. And then it's oh, wait, you need a code to do it. And it's and then they solve it in a minute. But it's interesting that they pull something out like that. And it's neat.
Yeah, because in Adventures, the moment that they overcome Snively's brainwashing is the end of the episode. But in this, they have a little moment where they've gone from 1 to 10, and then they go to 13 for just a second, and then back to 10.
It's great, yeah.
It's good pacing, frankly.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Last note is, I think this is a mistake, but when they try to make a cool transition when Snively is explaining about the freedom fighters, it transitions from Sally in the present in Knothole Village to a screen that Snively has, which I think is just for the transition, but the fact that he has a broadcast to Knothole Village doesn't make any sense.
Well, especially since the ending is that they give them the wrong coordinates on purpose.
Yeah.
Maybe that editing didn't go quite well with the continuity of the plot.
It looks nice, but it doesn't make actual logical sense.
Yep. Season 2, Episode 4, Blast to the Past, Part 1. After a disastrous failed mission, Sonic laments that they can't simply go back and prevent Robotnik's takeover. Dulcy tells them they can, and takes Sonic and Sally to the floating island, where they find the Time Stones. But in order to time travel to a desired destination or time, they have to synchronize their thoughts. Sonic allows his to drift to thoughts of chili dogs. They arrive on the eve of the takeover, just in time to see a pristine Mobius and meet Uncle Chuck and their younger selves, but not in time to stop Robotnik, then called Warlord Julian, from overthrowing the king.
Yeah, rather than going completely chronologically, since it was just mentioned, I have to say, having come from the comics and seeing this show, after having read a bunch of the comics, then seeing that, wait a second, Robotnik in the past was Julian, and he was, leading the Mobitropolis military, and, like, all that came from this show. What the heck? Like, it blew my mind.
Yeah, I mean, for so many years I had read some of the Sonic Archives comics, and I had never been clear on exactly what happened with Robotnik or what his connection to things were. And realizing that they spelled it all out in the cartoon and only referenced it in the comics because they're like, oh, these kids would have seen the cartoon. And, maybe if I had been a kid in, 1995, they would have been correct, but I wasn't. So it's this much longer companion piece outlasted the show, and it did so with the most vague allusions to things possible.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because in the comics, it kind of comes up somewhere around issue 50, I think. They do it like right before big stuff, and so it's not given very much explanation. But in here, you lead right into it with this whole time travel plot, so it makes more sense.
Yeah. Which, let's get into that. How do you guys feel about the fact that they this, because the purpose of this episode and the next one, since it's a two-parter, the purpose of it is clearly to explain the backstory of the show, not to actually move the plot forward. So how do you guys feel about the fact that they did it through time travel rather than just a long flashback episode?
I have things to say about time travel, but they can wait a few minutes.
But suffice to say, you'd prefer a flashback.
No, actually, I wouldn't, because that's not the characters really interacting. That's just things that have already happened. I do kind of prefer it this way, because you get the characters actually interacting with things.
Yeah, I suppose.
But I have things to say about time travel that may turn into a rant, so...
All right, we'll let that simmer. Let people start drilling at the mouth for that.
Well, I have no problem with this approach at all, save for one gripe we'll get to in a second. But for the most part, no, I think it's a brilliant way to explain the backstory.
Yeah.
A ton of information all at once, though. Like, my gosh. But
yes, I think it's a major drop.
I think it's justified, though, because if it had just been a flashback, then it would have been like, and why are you all saying this now? Why couldn't you have told us this before? But since it's actually worked into the continuing story, it makes more sense.
Oh, yeah, I suppose so. I will say it feels like a bit of a tease, because they say, you have to find the floating island and get the time stones on it, which floating island, that gives me Sonic 3 feelings. Time stones, those are a thing from Sonic CD. But there's no Chaos Emeralds in this show, and there's no Knuckles in this show.
Yeah, I was half expecting to see Knuckles. A little confused because time stones, not Master Emerald, but I still would have been happy to see him.
Yeah, which, they did plan for Knuckles to show up in Season 3, but the show got canceled, yada yada yada, we've been over it.
Yeah.
So, yes, about the floating island and the time stones. That's why one gripe. Dulcy just happening to have bumped into the floating island and not mentioning it until they're talking about wishing that you could change the past is a pretty contrived way of leading into things. But, I mean, I guess Dulcy is just a ditz, so whatever.
I feel like it would have been better if this was, like, information that they stole from Robotnik somehow. Like, there was something... maybe he wanted to get to the floating island and see what was there, but he couldn't because you need to be, like, pure of heart or something. I don't know.
That would have made more sense, yeah, I suppose. Sonic jumps off of the floating island and banks on Dulcy catching him, which is, like, the most reckless move I've ever seen, because she's literally asleep. Like, what?
Well,
yeah,
and, like...
I'd like to question, why does the dragon sleep like a bat?
I don't know. And it's not just that she's asleep when she does it, but also that Dulcy is just not someone who seems extremely reliable. Like, I'm not shitting on her or anything, but it's just she screws things up.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think she's just really quirky. That's why she hangs like a bat. And
I guess so.
Yeah, I'll say this. Here's what annoys me most about this island is that you have a riddle to access the time travel, and the answer to the riddle is just time.
That was interesting.
Is this like a speak friend and enter thing where the answer is that you're overthinking it because it's from an era where you didn't have to be so hostile about everything?
Yeah, it's a little silly, but I think I prefer this approach to riddles rather than the ones in Sonic and the Secret Scrolls where they're just kind of like, I have no idea
completely disconnected things,
but the characters are figuring it out.
Yeah. So we finally go back in time. We finally get to see Tim Curry. He's wonderful. I love him.
Wait, Tim Curry?
Who do they play?
Yeah, he's the king.
Wait, really?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Shit, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, like the king is not an extremely he's not an extremely fleshed out character in this show. He's a good dad and cares about his kingdom. But Tim Curry doing the voice makes it all for me. Which maybe that's just me. Apparently, if you guys didn't notice, but
I did not notice. I wish I'd noticed. I love Tim Curry.
I will say, oh man, seeing King Max gets me pumped. Yes, I'm gonna call him King Max. After all the foreshadowing this series, and then even though he's not properly found yet, seeing him in the past in the flesh, it feels like payoff in a small sense, and it's awesome.
Well, and he's a character who makes important and correct decisions given his situation, which makes it feel satisfying as a character that they've built up. Anyway, we learned that Uncle Chuck invented the roboticizer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now that you've said that, now I can call back to something we were talking about before. How did you make a de-roboticizer? So my theory is that Chuck invented the roboticizer. He says that he knew it took away the will of the people or whatever. So I have to imagine that he probably also created a reverse function.
Yeah.
To save the people that he initially tried it on, and so then Robotnik stole it and probably tried to get rid of that functionality, but didn't get rid of it completely. That's my theory.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's also funny that Robotnik, who we think of as this accomplished machine scientist, his most dangerous weapon wasn't even his.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, well, if you think of Eggman in the games and stuff, he'll often rely on, tools or, monsters or whatever the heck that he didn't create. So he'll just take an opportunity. You're right. Yeah, he didn't create it. It's a machine, so you would think he built it. So it's kind of ironic, but it's very in keeping with, oh, that's a useful thing. Yoink, it's mine now.
Yeah. We do get some things about the lore that I don't like so much, I'll say. We're now confirming that the event where Robotnik took over happened 10 years in the past on this show when Sally and Sonic and everybody were 5 years old, which is, since I don't know if it's been revealed by now, but Tails is 10 years old in the present, so Tails is either a baby or just not born yet. All of the freedom fighters have known each other since they were children.
What's wrong with that?
I think that it works better for this to be a ragtag group of people who were just, the only ones who happened to get out okay and happened to band together. The fact that they all knew each other, like Sonic and Sally knowing each other since they were kids is fine since Chuck is close with the royal family, but Antoine and Bunny and Rotor also being there is just a bridge too far for me. Especially since, for Antoine, this makes no sense, because if Antoine has been around English-speaking people since he was 5 years old, he should not be constantly forgetting English words as a 15-year-old.
I think it... Much as I have not liked Antoine so far, it does add more to his personality of him forgetting...
No, I mean, he's well-established. He has a shtick. I get it.
I get that. I know, but I mean, it makes him a more quirky character. Let's just go with that.
No, totally get it.
I hadn't thought about that, but now that you bring this up, Devin, I have to say, I think that they probably didn't have this in mind when they made the first season, and so probably changed a few details. I hadn't realized it before because I feel like it fits perfectly, but that's because I've got the comics and stuff and it's following along the same steps. But you're right. Probably they were supposed to be a ragtag group, and then they changed it. I wonder why, though.
Well, so my only problem with the idea of them being a ragtag group is to me, it was clear that they were doing this together because they already knew each other before Eggman. I guess you could call it a coup.
It is a coup.
Yeah, it's basically
because he's a military leader. It's
true. Oh yeah, that's right. He is literally the leader of the military.
It's like those like purist and rebel charts, with radical sandwich anarchy on one end or whatever. This is purist coup d'état.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So I don't know. To me, it felt like they already knew each other before Eggman took over.
I think that makes sense as an interpretation. I just find it more interesting to conceptualize the idea of these characters meeting and having to get along with each other.
That does make sense. I'm not saying that doesn't make sense. That makes perfect sense as well.
It's not a big deal. I'm not really upset about it.
Oh well, yeah.
Yeah.
To be fair, I think that is the case with the more minor freedom fighters.
That makes more sense.
Such as Dulcy. And all those other ones that show up in the background that don't have names.
Yeah, especially Dulcy, being she literally just appeared out of nowhere in the first episode of season 2.
Yeah.
But anyway, we brought up Robotnik, so I'm going to come back to that. I mentioned it before because I already knew it, but from the perspective of a watcher who is seeing this for the first time, it's a fascinating development to reveal that Robotnik, not only took over pretty much the entire... I don't know how far his rule actually stretches, but, the world is as far as it is important to the main characters. But also, he was originally, on the same side as the prior regime and then pulled this completely masterful betrayal.
Yeah, he helped them win a war and then dismantled their military, and then they didn't have anything to defend themselves with.
I wonder if they would have gone more into that in later seasons. Because I know the comics expand on the war before Robotnik.
Frankly, they do it way too much.
Became the head of the military. Either way, that's cool. And I forgot when we were talking about the first episode. I was like, it's weird that Snively's here. But this episode basically explains why Snively is the odd one out. Why Robotnik doesn't have any other living deputies except him, because he originally assisted in Robotnik's takeover, and so it makes sense that he would keep him around because he had he respected him or valued him enough or something such that he viewed him as not really a partner but kind of. Obviously this episode also reveals that Snively has ample reason to hate him if that wasn't already obvious.
I really thought you were going to say this episode reveals that Snively has more hair.
Well, that's true. He did have more hair, but that's not really important. But they were supposed to rule together, and then at the last second, Robotnik's like, no, psych. You can be my underling.
Yeah, and then, if you're in that situation, it's like, well, what do? Do you say no?
Yeah, basically. So anyway, my point is it's awesome and I love it.
Yeah.
So another thing, not that they're a particularly interesting character, but I am shocked that remember that one random character, Rosie, from the comics? They're here. Well, they're from here, obviously, but I know them from the comics. So just another one who I didn't expect to show up in this show.
Yeah, I don't have anything to say about Rosie Woodchuck. She seems nice. She seems like a good caretaker.
I said it was a bit of payoff before, but even more so just to have the king here, because near the end of this episode, Sally reunites with their father, and it's a very touching moment, as initially he doesn't recognize her, then he does, and it's like, oh wow, so finally they meet again.
I liked that.
And it's a nice moment, interrupted by Robotnik just demolishing the palace wall, crashing through in an airship, and then stepping down from a platform. Might I add, this whole episode, aside from this scene, he's got like this white, sort of nice general uniform that's different from his regular costume. But then in this scene at the end, he's got his regular garb, like sort of emperor garb that you normally see him in. And because you haven't seen him for the rest of the episode, it feels fresh and suddenly has a new intimidating sort of air to it. And
yeah, it
then
gives it context.
Yeah, exactly. And then he delivers this killer closing line where he says, "Your Majesty, members of the royal court, welcome to Robotropolis, the capital of my kingdom."
That was so cool.
It is
absolute unit. He's great.
It's just more proof Robotnik's just excellent.
100%.
Yeah. Blast to the Past Part 2. Sonic and Sally steal the roboticizer plans, stop the destroyer from polluting the Great Forest, and save Little Sonic, Little Sally, and Dulcy's mother Sabina, but are unable to prevent Robotnik from roboticizing Uncle Chuck or from banishing the king to the void. After they return to the present, Sonic laments that the trip was a waste, but Sally reminds him that they came close, and they will keep trying until they do triumph over Robotnik.
They also don't consider getting the plans for the roboticizer a plus.
I think Sally mentions it. Sonic is just a real downer for some reason.
Yeah,
because Sonic is kind of an Anakin Skywalker figure without turning evil, where if you don't win 1,000%, then it's a loss.
You don't win at all.
That's true. That's true.
That's kind of true.
How do you guys feel about Robotnik being named Julian?
I mean, I figured he had a name.
But we normally know him as Ivo Robotnik as his literal name, but apparently his normal name is Julian and he chooses Robotnik.
I don't think they've ever actually referred to him as Ivo in this show.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, so it's just not his name.
It's just Robotnik.
Yeah.
Or I guess Julian, technically. I mean, whatever. I mean, it's an odd choice. Julian's not that intimidating of a name, but
yeah,
I mean, when I first learned it in the comics, I thought it was bizarre, but that's been so long that I'm completely used to it by this point.
Well, the comics do add an additional layer of fucked up to it, because they say that his last name is Kintober, which he reversed to make it Robotnik, which is that weird old Sonic Bible, and it's like, you're mixing canons.
Now that you're asking me to think more deeply about it, though, I think Julian is a good choice. Not like over other things, but the fact that it's kind of not. It doesn't scream Robotnik because it was just a name that was given to him by his parents, presumably, not knowing that he'd turn into this maniac, and so he renamed himself to a more fitting name.
Yeah, I suppose
makes sense.
I guess as an aspect of Robotnik being the name that is, like, he intentionally associates with evil, giving him a more not more normal, but more common name to contrast it with. Because if he said his name was Ivo before and then went to Robotnik, that would definitely feel weirder just because Ivo is a less common real name. It is a real name, but...
So, getting into the episode, I like that, now that I've realized that Chuck is amazing, at the beginning of this episode, since Robotnik doesn't know about Sonic at all, it's so satisfying to see him recognize Chuck as the primary threat at the beginning until the guards to stop him. It's like, yeah, he knows who
damn right.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Chuck disables him because he's the best.
Of course.
It's pretty good.
There's a line where a Robotnik is talking to Snively, and he's like, smell that polluted air. Isn't it lovely? It's just another great dimension to Robotnik's insanity, because, like, that can't actually smell good to him, because he's not, like, augmented himself that.
Here's what I think it is.
He's just crazy.
Here's what I think it is. Did you ever, like, leave to get on the school bus to go home and you smelled the gasoline and you thought it smelled good?
Yeah, leaded gas or unleaded gas smells sweet.
I think maybe it's something like that.
Or semi-sweet. I don't know if sweet's the right word. It's like, it doesn't smell inherently bad.
Or maybe it's just the case like one of those guys who just thinks the smell of their own farts is incredible, you know? maybe,
yeah, or
maybe that disgusting...
Maybe Robotnik is just demented.
I think he's demented. That was kind of the point. I don't think...
Yeah.
Because... Yeah, I mean... If it actually smelled good, I don't think they would have bothered to mention it. It seems like it was supposed to be there because
to show
it was
how...
a Robotnik moment.
Right, to show how demented he already was.
Hey, what smells like bloody sinuses? Do we... I don't know if we should talk about it now or later, but Bunny is in this episode, and you see her getting taken off to be roboticized.
And almost roboticized.
You think, oh, that's going to be the origin point of that. And then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I was so confused by that.
It wouldn't have made sense, because then she would have had, like, a tiny arm and legs.
Yeah, that was why I was A, I was expecting it, and B, then going to be confused by it, because that would imply that the roboticized parts grow alongside, which doesn't make sense.
So I think the writers realized that too.
But then why did they put her in there? It just makes it feel like a non sequitur.
It's a bait and switch.
That's what it is.
I guess.
They want you to think Bunny's going to be partially roboticized, and then Sally and Sonic can get her out right in the nick of time, so only her legs and one arm get roboticized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which, I don't know. It's still weird, though, because that would mean that they would expect people to see their own flaw in their storytelling, and that's why they don't do it, but they still bait people to expect it in the first... Whatever. This is already hurting my head. I like how we're getting confused without even needing to talk about time travel.
We're not even talking about the bits that are actually confusing.
Yeah.
So, I almost mentioned it before when we were talking about the roboticizer, but Robotnik didn't make that. What Robotnik did make was the aforementioned destroyer. So, much as I like this duology, I don't know how you say it. There's two parts.
Duology is correct.
Duology.
I must say the destroyer is completely anticlimactic. Like, it just goes off and then boom, you have Robotropolis now instantly. We're back to the status quo. There's
just
no,
add water.
Yeah, that is odd.
There's no, dramatic moments as SWATbots tear down buildings and renovate stuff. I would have loved to see Robotnik deck out the throne room differently and use it as a temporary base of operations. But no, they were just lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the worst.
It's a pretty minor thing. Or I don't even know if that's minor or just
it's a presentation thing. It's it was going to happen anyway, so.
Yeah, it should have been more a gradual change, either through the episode or as the episode closes out, or not closes out, as they go back to present day, that's when we see Robotropolis in its full quote-unquote glory.
Yeah. Well, and it's because they do a couple, moving things toward the status quo here, because obviously we have Robotropolis, but we also have Robotnik accidentally roboticizing one of his arms.
I like that. That was a good call. Is that the right word? I don't know. That was a good call forward. Because I figured he just did that to himself because he's a mental case, but no, he did it by accident. I think that's cool.
Yeah. Similarly, Sonic tears out all of Snively's hair with a single motion.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because last night while I was watching these two episodes, I made a comment on our general chat saying I can only assume the fact that Snively has hair now and doesn't in 10 years means he lost all of it out of stress. And within literal moments of me typing that and sending it, Sonic tore out his hair. I'm like, well, never mind.
Man can't catch a break.
Yeah, that's a little silly, but My headcanon is that he actually never has ever been able to get more than just a few strands of hair. And the fact that he wears a wig is a closely guarded secret from everyone, including Robotnik. But then Sonic whooshed out of the way and blew it to smithereens, which he wasn't expecting.
That's pretty good. I support that headcanon.
I think that makes sense. Because Snively he doesn't seem like the type to be able to grow a lot of hair. Like, I feel like he was born with a full head of hair, but like a lot of kids who are born with a full head of hair, it ends up rubbing off.
Right.
Yeah. And then it just never grows back. The poor guy is just stuck like that for the rest of his life.
As someone with a lot of hair, Snively is, what I am afraid of becoming.
With someone who's got a thinning hairline, I understand his fears. Anyway,
I don't have I'm bad at transitions, but so I'm already way back in Game Guy, that episode where there's a pinball game.
Mm.
I heard, there's this dimensional warp that I created, and I'm like, that's very reminiscent of something I remember from the comics. And then, yes, I was right. It is, in fact, well, they call it the Void in this. I know it is the Zone of Silence, but either way, it's the same place that Max was imprisoned in. And on top of that, we get this line, which me with my knowledge goes, at, when Robotnik says, "Be sure to give Naugus my regards." And I'm like, what? He's in this too?
Huh. You see, to me, that meant absolutely nothing.
Yeah, because you haven't met Naugus.
Yeah, so I have no idea who Naugus is, so I assume... I don't know what to assume about that line, actually, so I'm not going to say anything.
Well, it's just a little hint for anyone who
right.
watches this in a way that the viewers were supposed to watch it in.
Well, no, because the viewers wouldn't have known who Naugus was either.
No, I mean, it's a hint that there's another character that's maybe
going to be expanded
on later. That's what I mean. I don't mean it's a hint to something that you could possibly put together.
Yeah.
I am a little confused why Robotnik would banish the king rather than roboticizing them. My only thoughts are they seem to have a certain respect for them because they always call them Your Majesty or Sire, even after they take over. So perhaps they think of them as like, a worthy opponent that needs a special sort of way to defeat them rather than just robotization.
What I think it is we, when we have roboticized people in this show, that is to say roboticized characters, not humans, they're generally shown very sparsely, only when they serve a specific purpose. Unless it's like Chuck, since he's, a main hero now. So what I think is that Robotnik only uses roboticized folk when he has to, or when, he just needs them for something. And if he were to roboticize the king, that would turn the roboticized king into a symbol and make people more likely to join the resistance efforts against him and to, be violent, uprising and opposition. And by not having the king around at all, you can't kill him because it's a kid's show, so they do the next best thing and make him go away to a place that nobody understands or knows about forever. It's to break people's will and hope.
Yeah, it's to prevent him from becoming a martyr.
Okay,
exactly.
Well, yes. That makes 100% perfect sense. Making them disappear rather than still having their image around. Yeah, okay. Good job. Yeah, that makes sense. Very nice. Thank you. There's a great retort from Robotnik to Sonic near the end of the episode where Robotnik says, "Who are you?" And Sonic says, "Someone you're going to learn to hate." And Robotnik says, "I already hate you." I just like it.
All right, let's talk about time travel. So, biggest problem with this is they travel back in time, and they are directly responsible for many of the things that we see in the present, but also they change stuff.
Yeah. So, I have a lot of problems with time travel stories, or at least time travel stories that are done either messily or poorly. I think this one's more on the level of messily than poorly.
Well, so I'm assuming the first thing you're going to say is, not only do they reveal to everybody that they're time travelers, but they also reveal themselves to themselves. The only thing they do is say they're different names.
That is one of the primary rules of time travel. Don't reveal yourself to either family or yourself, especially yourself. Don't change things. That's what I was thinking of. That's not exactly what I had in my mind, but that works. And don't kill anyone. They violate the first two.
So those are good rules for what you shouldn't do if you are a time traveler. I think that in storytelling, how you break those rules or how you support them can be a product of narrative, this and that. But every time travel story is going to establish its own rules, and this show's problem is that it's not consistent with its rules.
Right. So this is gonna be weird. And I think I'm the only one here who's watched the show. But I'm gonna compare these two episodes to the Umbrella Academy.
Okay.
Yeah, not familiar.
So it's a series. For those who don't know about it, it's a series that focuses a lot on time travel, but it does time travel very well, and it sets rules and only breaks them when it wants to create a problem. Like the current season is, they cause the grandfather paradox, and that starts the end of the universe.
Okay.
So they're showing that when you break the rules of time travel, there are consequences. This time travel in SatAM doesn't do that. They break the rules, and there's no consequences.
So it comes close to being alright, because I think that they, as they were writing this is what I imagine is going through their heads, is that they have Sonic and Sally travel back in time to try and stop things, but they can't stop things. And even though they get the plans to the roboticizer, that's not like a happy ending for them. That's still, they're probably coming at it from Sonic's perspective, that's still something of a failure. So they say, well, what can we do to make some kind of unambiguous win? And they settle on Rosie Woodchuck, because she's this character they've made who's nice, who's, kind and helpful and whatever. And so they say, well, since she's not there in the present, we can say that she died during this, or was roboticized. Did they say she died, or was...
Yeah, no, she was roboticized. She did go with them to Knothole, but she left Knothole into the Great Forest and got roboticized at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have her say, don't ever leave Knothole,
right?
And so then she is
and she
around.
Apparently didn't, and she's just around now.
Yeah, and so that makes sense, because that makes her a symbol of, we didn't lose, but it ultimately means that, well, so how the fuck does any of this make sense? Well, if you can change things, then what happened originally?
That begs the question, what else did they change by making sure Rosie is still alive?
So, this is what I didn't mention before, and I saved this. So you say there are no consequences for breaking the rules. Not actually entirely correct. There is a line when the destroyer is headed off to destroy the Great Forest. Sally mentions that didn't happen before. We must have changed something.
That is the only consequence. That is true. I forgot about that line. I forgot about that line that Sally mentioned, that didn't happen in their timeline.
Okay, but here's the problem that this creates, is that how does that follow from what they did? What is the butterfly effect that leads this? And it's like, it's never, it's hard to make that satisfying, but it's also like, if it's not there, it's like, it's a constant struggle.
It's hard, because at the end of the day, I did like these episodes, but I don't like poorly written time travel media. And these stories...
And we're not done with that in Sonic.
Yeah,
oh, no.
Well, I don't know.
Don't worry. Sonic 06 has so many bigger problems that we're not going to worry about time travel.
That's right, 06. Fuck! Yeah. No, I liked the episodes. I really did. I just think the time travel could have been a lot better done.
No, I agree. It's a perfectly fine opinion. You don't have to apologize.
It's a fine opinion, but I disagree with it. So the good point. I was going to mention that, but you mentioned it for me. That it's interesting that they somehow change the timeline, but they didn't attempt to explain how at all. I kind of forgot about Rosie, because spoilers, Rosie doesn't show up again in the series. I assume
I know. What a waste.
That's what I figured. they should, if they were going to retroactively add a character to the explain adding a character, they should have used her. Like, they just suddenly add Dulcy. Why not explain why she's there?
Well, it's interesting because they do rescue Dulcy's mom in this, so maybe that's part of it.
I would assume so. They rescued her mom, and
maybe we've got some actual like super brain mind level plot development going on, and whatever the moment between season 1 and 2 is when the actual circumstantial simultaneity of the time travel event happens, and Dulcy is superimposed into the main cast where she wasn't there before.
So that means them going back in time was saved Dulcy from dying.
I don't fucking know.
You guys are thinking too hard about that.
I know, and I don't want to, but when time travel is involved, I can't help but my brain go into fucking overdrive over stupid shit.
It's so fun.
Yeah, no, I would do that in an episode that warranted it more, in my opinion.
Yeah,
but I don't think it does, because what I was leading to is because Rosie doesn't show up. And it's just a line at the end, and the bit about the destroyer is also just a line. I'm pretty sure those are the only 2 instances where they do time travel. You can change it. Every other time is
fairly consistent.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it works. And if
yeah,
those 2 are very minor exceptions.
Yeah,
I must admit that doesn't make sense, and I would have done it that way, but it's not very egregious at all. And the rest of the time travel, I think, is fine or even fun.
Maybe we need like a fan edit to explain this.
It's not. I don't want to rant too hard because I can maybe go on way too long.
I think we've established our place pretty well. It's it's annoying. It's got problems, but ultimately,
but at the end of the day, with the kind of show SatAM is, it's kind of harmless, especially because
not a huge deal.
Pointing out that all the aspects from the time travel that were mentioned at the end of said episode never come up again make me wonder if the ending we saw is not the timeline that we go to in the next episode.
Well,
these 2 episodes are just like their own micro continuity.
Yeah, again, I think it was made.
Sure.
Again, I think it was made to be a framing device for the history of the show, and they did that about as well as they could. So
no, they did that quite well. I will totally admit they did that quite well, and as a framing device, it works.
Yeah.
It just makes me wonder if it's just micro continuity.
Well, I'm pretty darn sure Rosie would have shown up in later seasons. I don't know why they would have not used her at some point. But given what it is now, you could take it that way, I suppose.
Yeah, without the existence of the planned 3rd season, a little bit I know about it, it does seem like a lot of shit we see in this episode is just a different version of the Freedom Fighters trying to make a slightly better future, or trying to do their best to prevent their future from happening, and in turn just making a slightly happier future.
Yeah,
which is fine. If it really doesn't have any connection, at the end of the day, whatever.
Yeah, I think we should move on if that's all right with you guys.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good idea.
All right. Season 2, Episode 6, Fed Up with Antoine / Ghost Busted. So this is an oddity. This episode is split into 2 11-minute episodes instead of a full 22-minute one.
Yeah, it's a double feature like an episode of SpongeBob.
Yeah, this is the first 2-in-1 episode of SatAM, which are generally weaker, and I don't like them as much.
No, because they have relatively nothing to do with the main stories.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was kind of bored by the first half, but I actually enjoyed the second half because we got a little bit of a boys' night out.
Let's talk about the first half. Fed up with Antoine. Antoine is appointed king of a biker gang, unaware of their cannibalistic tradition. That's the whole summary. It's way shorter than the other ones.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the most.
I mean, that's all you need
to describe it.
For a series where the YouTube description were just extremely long, it's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Well, there isn't a whole lot that goes on.
Yeah, it's just Antoine becomes the king of a biker gang. Which, first of all, why does a biker gang need a king?
Why are they all hyenas?
They're just crazy. They're just
Well,
crazy hyenas.
They're clearly crazy, but
I feel like I've made a lot of like furry fan fiction jokes, but this group of hyenas who like they kidnap Antoine and they're like really ravenous and wanna eat him, and they like sniff his feet at one point, and it's like, okay, I'm starting to get a little weirded out.
That was really weird.
Them having more obviously humanoid proportions than any other characters in the show does not help.
Yeah.
It's just, as Lauren said, it's weird. How are there biker gangs? These seem like exactly the type of people to be leading their own revolution against Robotnik. They are adults, but they're just going around appointing people king and then eating them.
To me, this seems like a group that would fit more in place in Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog.
I was gonna say that, yes. Honestly, it has more of that feel. It's not nearly as over the top, but
yeah.
My only note on this episode is when Antoine, there's a funny moment where he's disapproving of the way they're cooking him, not because they're going to eat him, but because they're using pepper rather than paprika.
I got a chuckle out of that. That was kind of funny.
Antoine getting extremely concerned over correcting other people on cooking that's like a negative character trait that I think works well for him, because it's not making him just a huge liability on missions. It's just kind of him being pedantic in a funny way. Maybe it's a dark commentary that he's more concerned with this because he values his own life so little. But
Jesus Christ.
He does get one drop kick on one of the biker dudes, and so applause for Antoine for that.
And then he spends the ending of the episode bragging about it.
Oh, of course he does.
Yeah, of course.
Ghost busted. Sonic and Tails investigate a possible ghost problem while camping out.
Yeah, that's about it.
The summary actually could have been more detailed than that. The other one could have too, but this one by a bit more. Anyway, but whatever. I guess they don't care much about these episodes either. I don't blame them.
Yeah, a micro horror story here, mostly starring Tails. Just him and Sonic trying to figure out what's going on with this strange glowing wood spirit, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's obviously based off the scary story that they're telling at the start about the headless gopher, which is immediately annoying to me because they show this, what they allege is this monster, and he very clearly has a head.
Yeah.
That is true.
And I know that it's not him. It's Antoine in glow in the dark pajamas or whatever. Spoiler alert! It's not glow in the dark pajamas, but leaves. But it's like what are you even upset about? Tails I get because he's a small kid and it could be whatever. But Sonic, yeah.
I don't think Sonic is fooled for very long.
No, he isn't.
So it's mainly Tails.
Yeah, it's just Tails, because Tails runs away from Sonic because he thinks Sonic has been...
Oh yeah, I guess Sonic spends most of the episode trying to explain to him that no, it's just Antoine.
That's just exactly.
Yeah.
Alright, well,
Yeah, so the plot here is very contrived. Yeah, there just happens to be a foxfire plant, they call it, that flashes yellow, and Tails immediately jumps to the conclusion that Sonic was brainwashed rather than is trying to just explain things, and it draws out the plot a lot.
See, if they had put this episode right after the Sonic losing his memory episode, then that would feel like a good, little bit of anxiety for him, but it's not. I suppose from Tails' perspective it might be, but...
The only thing, I have a little note here. So Sonic has several scary stories he tells Tails, and my favorite one is there was this Mondo evil spirit sea, and he decided to become a duck. Like, what? Best scary story ever.
Maybe it's like maybe it's playing off your understanding of the ancient exploits of Zeus turning into geese.
Oh yeah, well I hadn't considered. Yeah, some ducks are vicious.
That's true. They are. They're angry as hell. Mallards are male ducks, right?
I think so.
Yeah, they tend to be very, very aggressive.
I got bit by a duck once.
Damn, that is actually kind of scary.
Nah, because it was a baby one, and he was only biting me because I was holding food out for it, and it just...
Oh,
was
okay,
eating
well
my
that's all
fingers.
different.
Actually, I think Lauren was present for that.
It might have been, I don't remember.
Well, it was like 15 years ago, so how could you?
Okay.
Yeah, no, both these episodes are weird little vignettes. I'm not sure what to make of them. I wouldn't say I was extremely bored, but it did feel like why are you doing this? You could make another cool episode.
The first half was a little boring. As I said, I liked the second half. It was fun, just camping trip. And I tend to like camping trip episodes in cartoons, like the Sea Bear episode of SpongeBob.
No, that's an oval. You have to make a circle.
Make a circle.
My last note on this episode is the ending does that thing I've seen in some other cartoons where it's like, oh, there wasn't actually a weird thing going on.
Oh, yeah.
And then at the very end, oh, but there was actually. And there's the medallion of the headless gopher, and everyone runs away scared.
Oh my gosh, Eccles. Yeah. Season 2, Episode 7, Dulcy. Dulcy is summoned to a dragon mating ground as Robotnik seeks to roboticize the remainder of her species. Wow, this is another really short synopsis. I don't know, maybe the intern just got, lazy.
I guess. Yeah, there's definitely more to it than that.
Well, because she's being psychically compelled to head there. It's part of dragon puberty, I guess.
Yeah, so I understand having to continue the species, but entering a trance state where you aren't aware of your surroundings and flying many, many miles doesn't seem evolutionarily advantageous to me.
Yeah, is she a salmon? Or a Vulcan?
They show Robotnik being woken up at night while he's sleeping, which I always thought was weird because they're always infiltrating Robotropolis at night. But then I realized they're not infiltrating Robotropolis at night. The sky is just black there because of all the fumes.
Yeah, all the pollution.
Yep.
So this is the first time we see Robotropolis at night, and it looks exactly the same.
Right. I mean, it's an easy way to save on animation budget.
Yeah.
It makes sense lore-wise, though, which is nice.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that, but my only thought on that was it's cool because the show doesn't really do it that much, although it did do it a few episodes ago, but for a very good reason. This one, just for fun, it decides, let's give Robotnik a different getup, and I always think that's neat.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
I'll say it is a little... This episode, is called Dulcy, and the description talks about Dulcy. Most of this episode is spent trying to save a different dragon and her baby egg, and Dulcy is mostly just a caretaker for it.
A caretaker for 5 minutes, also.
And when that egg finally hatches... This is, I think, my main problem with the dragons in this show, is that I think they're ugly. I don't like looking at them.
They remind me of the dragons from Dragon Tales.
I think the dragons in Dragon Tales looked less bad.
Don't you dare compare these dragons to Dragon Tales dragons.
To be honest, I don't think I watched Dragon Tales as a kid.
Oh, well, that explains it, because I, for one, did.
I don't think I did, at least.
Well, we're in 3 different states where I think Bruce has repressed PBS memories, and I have half unlocked PBS memories, and Lauren has the full spectrum, especially since he's got it's a sister 10 years younger than him, so he's got more recent memories of PBS stuff.
I definitely have. Granted, I can barely remember what I did 20 minutes ago.
Well, yeah, I can't remember things from 20 minutes ago, but, not quite, but...
But 15 years ago.
15 years ago. I was going to say 20 years ago, but that doesn't work. 15 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, no, 15... Strangely enough, I'm kind of the same way. There's a lot of stuff from, middle school, high school, even elementary school that I do remember. But if you ask me something I did while playing Elden Ring earlier, I could not tell you, anything I did other than co-op.
Really? Not even the connection errors?
Now that you remind me about them, I could.
Okay. Anyway.
We're spiraling off topic again, yeah.
We have a habit of doing.
So we we haven't really gotten in much to Dulcy as a personality, and I think that displays part of a problem with the character writing, is that I think most of her character is just agreeable, slightly goofy, and prone to a lot of the same jokes over and over.
He's a one-trick pony when it comes to writing.
She flies him around, and she can't land right, and she gets hit, and she says, "I'm coming home, Ma," which is not funny, and it starts to grate on me at a certain point.
You know, it's even less funny when you have to assume her mother probably died.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to turn into a joke. And it's a shame, because I like...
roboticized.
It's a shame, because I like Cree Summer. I enjoy her performances in almost everything that she's in. You know, Codename Kids Next Door was part of my childhood, and Number 5 is the coolest character on that show. Sorry, Numba. But she's just not engaging as a member of the team here. And it's weird, because as much as I criticize, like, Antoine in this show, I think he's better established and has something of a development.
He is. He really is.
At the end of this episode, they give Dulcy a pair of knee pads so that if she crashes, it's not as painful. And I'm like, okay, that's a little nice thing that they do for her. And then she doesn't wear them ever again. Well, but I'm just saying that goes to show that it feels like she's not being handled with the care that she should be.
That's interesting you say that, because the Sonic News Network says they do reappear.
Oh, maybe I'm not paying attention.
They may not. They to be fair, they may not have brought attention to the fact that she's wearing the knee pads.
Okay, well, either way, I agree with the broad points. So even though the episode is literally named after her, they don't really go much into her. I feel like they would have developed her further if the series had gone on, though, because they do leave hints at the end. They're like, "Oh, Dulcy, you are the chosen one. I mean, you're a protector or whatever, dragon. So you're special." So they probably would have tried harder, but it wasn't the plans for this season. So
again,
I guess
we get into the fact that this show should have gone a third season to flesh some things out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say yes, but I think that we can't be excusing of it because it had set up potential for good later episodes.
No, we can't. No, I'm not saying we should excuse it. I'm just saying, I think it's another moment of the show needed a third season, because there was a lot of stuff it started using and then just kind of drops.
Yeah, I think the later episodes definitely could have softened the blow, certainly.
Right. Also, is it this episode that Dulcy also breathes fire?
Yeah, that's one of my notes. So she can both breathe ice and fire.
I mean, that's kind of cool that she has, depending on the need, she can do fire or ice.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Because, usually dragons only have one breath. So it's kind of cool to see one that can do, fire or ice. Maybe she can shoot water, maybe acid. I don't know.
We just need to give her electric as well to round out the skill tree.
That's true. That'll get you the three legendary birds.
Yeah. Dulcy, for some reason, thinks that the egg is their own, even though they walk into the tower and it's already there.
And they also
make
it pretty clear that adolescent dragons start going there as just genetic memory. Sally straight up says that, so it's
yeah, I feel like
I assume, being the fact that Sally mentioned that, I assume that means Dulcy is considered an adolescent dragon. Being she's only
she's not full grown,
12 years old or something.
And I mean, that's not even my biggest problem with the egg thing. It's just there are some things you'd have to remember to assume that an egg was your own.
Well, so if she was still in a trance state, then she probably wouldn't remember
That's what I was thinking.
All the more reason to not make this a part of the dragon physiology. That it starts to feel a little creepy.
It's a little weird and doesn't make a whole lot of sense to make that part of a dragon's evolutionary. I don't know. It's weird. I'd also like to point out Sally apparently sleeps in more clothing than she wears during the day.
Okay, so I don't think too hard about it because
I don't want to think too hard about it either. I just thought that was kind of funny. I saw that, paused for a second, and thought, "Huh, interesting."
Yeah, no, I don't blame you.
It's cold at night.
Yeah, that's fair, honestly.
And on that uncomfortable revelation, that's the end of this episode. I think next week is going to be our last batch of SatAM episodes. We're going to do 6 episodes instead of 5, because I miscounted how many there were, but it's much easier to divide by 5 than by 26. Anyway, feel free to share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed, and if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you can always reach us at deepdivezonepod@gmail.com or at deepdivezone on Twitter. Have a great night, and we'll see you next week.